We got 1 minute to go. We got just about everybody.
I'm sorry? No.
I just about got everybody. Except Layla. I don't see Layla.
She's just getting logged on.
Okay. We got 1 minute to go. We got just about everybody.
I'm sorry?
There she is. Okay, it's 3 o'clock. I think everybody is aboard, so I'm going to call the June workshop to order. And the first item on our agenda today is to talk about our hazard mitigation plan and intergovernmental agreement. I'm going to turn that over to Layla to introduce what we're going to discuss on that.
Thank you, Mayor Scott, and good afternoon, everyone. We're joined here today by Catherine Daniel with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. Catherine is leading the coordination for the Natural Hazards Mitigation Plan for Governmental County. And so I've been attending the monthly meetings. Catherine is sort of leading the whole work effort. And part of that is for the city to participate through not only just through my participation, but as a partner, a plan partner through this IGA. So I wanted to invite Catherine, and I'm grateful for her to make the time to come tonight to share with you sort of an overview of the program and what the IGA is designed to do. I think it's something that the city should support. It's obviously something I think we have supported in the past, but there are benefits that come with us being a plan signer. And I know that Catherine can share more details on that. So it's been a real learning process for me. I will tell you that much. And I'm grateful to Catherine for both her patience and guidance as I learn more about the process and do the best that I can to help support this regional effort. So with that, Catherine, may I hand the mic over to you and ask you to take the team through?
Sure. I didn't prepare any
That's okay.
But I know this IGA very well, and essentially the intergovernmental agreement formalizes the relationship between the city of Manzanita and DLCD, so that we can each understand our roles in putting together the NHMP Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan update. The city of Manzanita participated in the previous update, so there's a good set of information from which to work. But sort of focusing on what the agreement outlines, I'm assuming that you all have it. I can find it and share it if need be, but essentially it lays out the expectations for participation in the meetings, which Layla has been doing already, and you as council are doing now. And the anticipation that you will seek to provide access to the public for comment on plan, on the drafts of the plan, and on various ways that we will come up with as a steering committee to engage the public and seek their input. The other thing that it essentially lays out as a responsibility of the community is to adopt the plan once it's completed. So the idea being that through Layla's participation and her continuing update to you about where we are and what we've been including in the plan will lead to a plan that you can support. So I suppose those are the basic things. There's a set of, what responsibilities DLCD has, of course, as on the other side of that. And I orchestrate the process. I'm joined by Sarah Absher from Tillamook County in that effort. And I'm doing the writing and the researching, so you don't have to. And what else? It's all laid out in the, I feel a little bit at a loss because I'm not looking at it, but those are the essentials. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. One of the most common questions, if you read the document carefully, it talks about contributions in cash, in kind, or both. I have not ever worked with a community that does its contribution in cash. It's all by in-kind contribution. So that means that Layla's time and your time, should you care to document it through a cost share form, is paired with salary information, and that value represents your in-kind contribution. Another question that sometimes comes up is, well, how much is that we're obligated to provide? And it's a sort of a squishy answer, because the way this is really set up is the Oregon Office of Emergency Management is the one who has received the grant from FEMA. It's FEMA money that's funding this. They've received the grant and they sub-grant to us, DLCD. And DLCD is working with Tillamook County, the city of Albany. Now I'm blanking. There's a couple of other jurisdictions in this grant. And all of those jurisdictions we work with to gather in-kind contribution, which will amount to 25% of the total grant. So it gets a little bit mucky in terms of how much participation is the city of Manzanita required to do. But we've attempted to sort of put a number on that. It's in fact the very last number in the scope of work. It's maybe the last, I wanted to say words, but it's a number. So some jurisdictions have concern that, oh yeah, we're obligated to provide, say, $10,000 worth of in-kind contributions, and how does that all shake out if we're just one of several? So in actuality, there's no money that changes hands. We are just putting this agreement together so that we can emphasize the importance of participation and keeping the council apprised, so that when we come to the end of the process, you've been informed all along and are ready to adopt. So I've kind of jumped along into different places on the IGA, but I can answer questions.
Anybody have any questions? Yeah, Steve, I don't think we can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Or
Yeah, we can hear you.
so first I want to apologize, because just before we went on air here, I realized that my webcam for some reason went kaput. So I'm using my laptop, which means that my screen is above me, but my laptop screen is blank. So I'm constantly looking up like this. So I'm not dismissing anybody. It's just very hard to train your eyes. Anyway, I just wanted to make a comment more than a question, and that being that I have really appreciated the hazard mitigation plan in the past. I used it a lot in the development of the emergency operations plan, because it does detail in a large degree both the hazards we faced and the probability of those hazards actually happening. And those were all included in what we adopted now, I guess, a couple of years ago, of a emergency operations plan. So I found it to be incredibly well thought out, that it's very detailed, and I just want to compliment you. I'm not sure if you had a part in the original plan or the plan before anyway, but the plan as it currently stands is outstanding. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Great. Yes, I agree. My colleague Marian Lahav was instrumental in putting that plan together. So as I mentioned, it's a great basis to work from.
So is this plan need to be adopted at some point by the council at a council meeting?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Obviously, we're not going to do that here at the workshop, but in some future meeting, I'm sure Leila will have it on our agenda. So.
Oh, you mean the IGA?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. The IGA needs to be signed by someone with the authority to obligate the city.
Yeah. Which is.
And you could do that at this work session. I'll leave and let you talk, but.
What is the plan, Leila? Is this something that we have to have it adopted at the council meeting, or?
Yeah, so what I'm trying to do is kind of follow our little process of trying to discuss an item at the work session and then come back to council, either to another work session to continue that discussion, or if we feel we have enough information that you feel comfortable recommending we move forward, then I can prepare just a quick resolution for us to sign that IGA. So if the council deliberates, well, you're not deliberate, but you discuss today and decide that you feel that that could be ready for the regular agenda, I'll put it on for July and get that signed. And then we'll do updates throughout the process, as Catherine suggested, and maybe we'll even try to get Catherine to come back and help with some of those updates. And then once the plan is ready for public comment, we'll want to have that folks aware of that as well. And then the council will ultimately adopt the plan.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Catherine on that?
Mayor, I just have a quick clarification. So Catherine, I was going to ask you whether or not your agency has plans in place with neighboring jurisdictions. And then you mentioned Albany as part of this grant, so that kind of threw me off a little bit. Could you just explain?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. No, the city of Albany has its own natural hazard mitigation plan, and they, like the county of Tillamook or Tillamook County, are in the process of updating it.
Okay.
So it's a separate entity, but
okay.
Multiple projects are lumped together in one grant. I did neglect to say, well, what do you get out of this? And I think that's important to realize. What the city of Manzanita gets out of this is eligibility to apply for FEMA grant funding. And this is both grant funding that you might seek after a disaster, but more importantly, it's grant funding that you can seek before a disaster, pre-disaster mitigation. These are things that the city can do to lessen the severity of choose your favorite hazard. We go through the range, and hopefully at the end of the process, we come up with a few really key projects that the city would like to accomplish. And this plan gives the city eligibility to make those applications.
Can I make one more, thanks, Catherine. Can I make one more comment? And that is, for those that haven't read the plan in a while, and this, for me, it's even been a while, but, and it used to be on the website as something I'm calling it the original. I'm not even sure it was the original, but the plan that we're currently working from was on the website for a long time, and might be something we want to make sure is back up there, because it gives people an understanding of what a hazard mitigation plan actually is. But I also wanted to suggest that, as I remember the plan, there are very specific sections devoted to Manzanita. It's not a county plan in the sense that it's all about Tillamook County. It is about Tillamook County, but it includes specific sections about Manzanita, Nehalem, Wheeler. All the different communities are broken down and have a lot of facts associated with those specific communities. So it's worth a read. I think it's really helpful. as you think about hazards and mitigation and natural disasters. And just wanted to add that as well.
I would point out that Tillamook County has reposted. They, like you, I think, had it up during the 2016-2017 period when it was being updated, but it's there again on the Tillamook County website, and you could link to it. That's probably the easiest way.
Okay, does anybody have anything else for Catherine, or sounds like we're done with this discussion? Is there anything else we got to cover on this, Leila, or?
No, I think just maybe a general consensus that I should bring this back to the regular session meeting next month.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we got consensus on that. I see
Seems
heads
like it.
nodding.
Good.
And thumbs up.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you, Catherine. I really appreciate your time and explanation and hard work. And we will get this on our agenda next month and
Lovely.
follow up with you after.
Great. Thanks very much. Nice
you.
to see you all. Hopefully I'll see you in person one day. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Okay, our next item today is we're going to talk about community outreach and engagement, and Leila is going to lead that discussion, I believe.
I am. Well, thank you. So this is actually, I think, an informal conversation, but one that I think is important and I thought would be a good use of our time, because we have a lot of work that's coming up, and I wanted to sort of share an outline of the many, I think, events that we have coming up for sort of in-person engagement. But before I did, I actually had a conversation with a community member, and that person suggested that I sort of spend a little bit of time going through sort of what the purpose of our council meetings are, and what those are in terms of how community members should and could participate. So I thought I would just take a moment and kind of, if the council will indulge me, sort of run through that, largely for the benefit of our community members. And this person also asked that maybe it might make sense to sort of we've done this in the past where we take a piece of a video and put it online. So if other folks want to come and look at it. So, Josh is back there in our IT world, so I'll check in with him to see if we can do that. And I think the real purpose of this is because I know there's a lot of folks that really see that the council meetings are a place for us to really have a community discussion. And while in some respects the council meetings are set up to get feedback, they're actually meant to do something pretty specific. And so I thought I would spend some time. I found this manual created by the Oregon Department of Justice that just describes in really plain words what a public meeting is. So I'm going to start there. And then I had a few sort of summary slides of just the many public events that are coming up. And I wanted to then open it up for a discussion with the council about other ideas, as well as perhaps engaging with folks that might be here today to get feedback, because there's 101 different ways you can do outreach. And I'd like to hear from folks far and wide about what they think. So does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. And thanks for letting me be a little flexible. I want this to be a conversation, so don't hesitate to ask questions or shoot ideas out. We rarely get a chance to brainstorm together as a team. So you can see my screen, I hope.
Yep.
All right. And I know this is all redundant for many of you, but again, this is just for our community members. So starting with Oregon Public Meeting Law. So this is a public meeting, as everyone knows. And these laws were put into place because of concerns about secrecy. Actually, when I was sort of researching this again, I was shocked it was only in the 70s that many of these laws went into place. But we do have open government laws, and those are in place because it allows citizens access to the process of deliberation. So it allows them to view the government and attend these meetings and understand how these deliberations are being made, what the decision-making process is, and it allows citizens, hopefully provides a little bit greater trust about how these decisions are being made. Because, I think that this concept of backroom deals and things like that really comes from before these meeting laws were in place. A lot of those meetings may have taken place outside of the public eye, and then decisions were made and folks just really weren't sure why. So that's why we have public meetings laws. But the meeting is really, this is a meeting for the council and for myself to discuss all of the different policy issues, to make decisions. This is the only time that I get to talk to the five of you, that the five of you get to talk to each other. And so we conduct business at these meetings, and the public is invited to view them. And so what is a public meeting? Well, it's the convening of any governing body for which a quorum is required to make or deliberate towards a decision on any matter or to gather information. We need to make sure all voting is done in public, so there's no secret ballots, and we have to make sure everybody's here to do that. The law requires that we provide notice. So the city has, in the year that I've been here, and as publishes an agenda in advance of the meeting that outlines 1 week in advance what is going to be on that agenda, so what business is going to occur. It needs to be made accessible to everyone, so we post it in 3 places around town. We put it on the city's website. And it has to be accessible to everyone. So when we were doing in-person meetings, we have to make sure that everybody, differently abled folks, folks that may have hearing disabilities, can participate in those meetings. The public law guarantees the public can view public meetings, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it can speak at them. And I know this has been a little confusing. We had a couple of meetings where we had some folks sort of hoping that there would be this back and forth question and answer session. And that's typically not how public meetings work. Governing bodies actually are allowed to set their own rules for citizen participation and comment. Now, I think I probably speak for everybody when I say that having citizen participation and public comment is essential. So though we're not required, we of course want to have that. So that's sort of the framework for Oregon public meeting law. And essentially a council meeting is a business meeting that the community is invited to attend to ensure that we are deliberating, getting information and making decisions in the public realm. And I think that's the best way to make decisions. And we have also set up a process where the citizens can provide public comment. But this is not a time for sort of community engagement in a way of like a town hall meeting or an expression of everyone's concerns. It's really a time for the city to conduct its business. So our city rules, you can find in the City of Manzanita rules of procedures, the city council meetings, and that is on our website. Our city rules have our agenda in the order as follows. So we do call to order. We have in the past done audience introductions, and that's a may. We may do that if we choose to, and we have elected not to because we have so many people attending these meetings that it actually becomes really challenging for us to get work done if we go through an audience introduction process. So we have not done that, at least in the time that I've been here. We then allow for public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Now, this is really the only time that we, by rule, allow for public comment, except for if there's a public hearing. Public hearings, we do take public comment on those agenda item, that agenda item, which is different from what happens here. Then we go through the consent agenda, committee reports, new business, old business, the city manager report, and other items before we adjourn. So that's how our city meetings are set up. So I think with that, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And I thought I would just if the mayor, if you're okay with this, well, first I'd see if the council has any questions. And if not, I wanted to see if we could ask if the public has any questions about sort of the purpose and intent behind public meetings. And the other thing I'll express too is that public meetings also have rules in which how we do our conduct. So we don't just say things like we call this meeting to order because it's cool. It's because we do follow what Robert's Rules of Order. So that is parliamentary procedure. It is the procedure for how public meetings are held so that we can actually move forward and get work done. And so there's a whole process that goes into that. So for example, folks that sort of raise their hand during a meeting in Zoom and just kind of want to say something, or folks that were wanting to sort of put things into the chat, those actions are actually outside of the rules of order for conducting public meetings. Those would actually be seen as pretty big distractions and would not be allowed in a in-person setting. And so what we're trying to do is translate what we do in an in-person setting into an online setting. And granted, there's some differences, and I understand that, but I just want folks to know that you're not being shut down and you're not being ignored. It's just that we have to run these meetings so that we can conduct the business we need to conduct in order to achieve and meet the decisions that we need to. And so there are rules around how we interact with each other. So there's reasons why I don't just interrupt folks when they're in the middle of talking. And we have orders in terms of how we present information and how we speak to each other. So when you raise your hand outside of a time that is not specifically dedicated to public comment, you are out of order. And so you won't be called on. If you, and the reason why we did disconnect the chat is because people were chatting during times that was not appropriate and it was distracting. It's actually no different than if you stood up in the middle of the meeting and was like, hey, I have a question, and we're in the middle of a hearing. It doesn't work. You wouldn't do that in an in-person setting. And so what we're trying to do is kind of translate some of these characteristics that we need to have in order to hold these meetings into an online session. And so it's not, we're not trying to penalize folks. We're not trying to dismiss folks. We're running a meeting, a business meeting for which you are invited to attend and to participate. Now, I want to open it up for questions from the council and the community, but I also want to preface by saying it doesn't mean that we don't need to do more community outreach. And I think there's a different venue in which we can benefit more from getting outside of city council meetings to hear from folks and into the community to hear from folks. And so I'm going to go through some ideas today, and I would love to engage with this council and the community on other ideas so that we can start to move forward, provide our community with a venue by which they can provide information, be heard, hear that feedback, played back to them. But I just want to be really thoughtful and clear that the city council meetings are for conducting city business and that we are delighted to have you attend and participate where appropriate. But we do ask that people please respect and follow the rules. So with that, I'm going to be quiet. I hope it was helpful and would welcome any feedback from the council or questions, and then certainly any questions, comments, or feedback from the public. Did I just bore you all to death?
No,
Right.
the counselors are all sitting there stone-faced. I think
I have a couple of questions, Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
Sure. So first of all, I'm more excited to hear about the sort of non-meeting venues for community engagement, Lila, that you referred to. But while we're talking about council meetings, two thoughts that I've heard a lot about. One is that public comment, I understand it to be an opportunity to talk about matters not on the agenda and not to expect or engage in debate with council. But there are several times when members of the public use their 3 minutes, so to speak, to ask a question to which there is an answer that we could provide. Or more likely, there is another development going on below the surface that we could alert them to so that they would understand that their concern is in fact being addressed at some point, either currently or in the future by the city. And I just feel like we miss those opportunities because we kind of lock ourselves into a no comment approach. And I'm wondering if, not every public comment is equal. Some public comments are an opportunity to vent, and some public comments really do raise questions that can be answered on the spot or make comments that could be amplified or supplemented on the spot. And I just wonder if there is an opportunity for either the mayor or the city manager to do that, or if it's deemed safer to just take that monolithic approach to all comments. And then my second question about our meetings is that, yes, it's clear that we have a public comment section. It's clear that we allow testimony during public hearings. But then there's been the practice over the years of taking comments, at least on some items of new business, or maybe old business too. And I'm not sure whether that's a practice that we sort of approach somewhat casually on an ad hoc basis. I guess the rules probably say that there is no public comment on those agenda items, but we've certainly allowed it in many cases. And I wonder if, we run the risk of being inconsistent to the point of appearing to be arbitrary issue to issue. So if you could if there's a way for us to clean that up or do it differently.
Well, I think that's great. So your first question was about
Public comment and whether or not if somebody makes a comment to which there is a
the questions, to whether to respond. And so in my experience, the response is varied. So to me, it can go one of three ways. I think what I wanted to make clear is the expectation that there isn't debate. Because typically at public comment, we're not prepared and we don't know what folks are going to say. And it presents sort of a challenging way of having a discussion.
Right.
I think for things that are pretty easy or straightforward, we know really off the top of our heads. I think it's really at the discretion of both the mayor and the council and the manager to determine if they feel that they have adequate information to answer at that time. More complicated questions or things like that, I would say we should adopt a practice, and this is something I wanted to ask, of responding at the next meeting. So that's been my experience in the past, that when a community member comes, they ask a question, we say, okay, thank you. We will either respond to you in person and get your contact information, or we will follow up at the next meeting. And I would like to get into the practice of that. If that's something that the council is open to. In the community I worked in that we did that the most, the city manager report was actually up front, so that those kinds of questions could be answered right before the public comment period. And then folks didn't have to wait till the very end to hear that update. So that might be one way that we could do that. But again, to me, it typically matters around the complexity of the question, how much time we have, because what happens is when you answer the question, and we've seen this happen a lot, then there becomes a back and forth. And I've had a couple members of the community express some concern because we thought they'd answered their question and we removed them, but a counselor had answered, and so they wanted to reply back. So I always think that there is a bit of flexibility that has to happen to some extent, but that we try to be consistent and mindful that we do have a time frame and we do have business to attend to. So to just try to keep things moving. So I think it's a squishy answer, but hopefully it's a good one.
Can I throw in 2 cents here?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the public comment's always tricky. The rule I think we all kind of go by is any counselor or the city manager or the mayor can respond to somebody comment, but we're not required to. And sometimes it's easy to respond, and other times it's not so easy to respond. And what's happened in the past many times, and you never know, all of a sudden you're in a debate. And then and which you're trying not to get into. So it's, as you say, it's squishy. And we got to go back to the main purpose of the city council meeting is to conduct the city's business off the agenda. And the big part of my job is to try to keep us on the agenda, keep it moving along. Now, this community, almost on every agenda item, I ask for public comment when it seems to be appropriate, and which I don't think goes on in everybody's city council meetings. It's a habit Gary Bullard had when we were doing public meetings and had 6 people in attendance. Now we have 100 people in attendance online, and we've opened up the access to so many people. So my job, I'm kind of like a ringmaster at a circus. I want everybody to be heard, but we got to move along and do the city's business to stay on the agenda. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I would just echo that doesn't happen at every meeting. And I think that just to prepare the community too, that as we get busier, and we're dealing with some really big issues. And I think all of us know that our agendas are going to be busy and packed, lots of big things happening for us over the next several years. Opportunities like that may start to go away because we have to start to, like the mayor said, we used to have 6 people and maybe not such controversial things on the agenda. Well, when that starts happening, we do have to make sure we preserve enough time for us to conduct that business. But at the same time, we need to be doing outreach on those issues in a different forum so that community members have an avenue in which that they can express their concerns, see those concerns again written out and reflected back to them and discussed in a way that leads to policy, right, that we can start to implement to address those concerns. But I think that needs to happen in a separate, specifically focused venue.
There's some other restraints on us too that are in our rules and procedures. I believe public comment is limited, correct me if I'm wrong, I think 15 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. It's in those rules of procedure. And we've set a time limit in there of the meeting can last no more than 2.5 hours. Now, we moved it up a while ago from 7 to 6. And so we need to conduct the city's business within that 2.5 hour time frame, which takes us now to 8:30. And if we go beyond that, and we've had to do that a few times, it takes an unanimous approval of the entire council for each 30-minute increment. And I think we did that because some of us old troopers, after 2.5, 3 hours, we've about expended our energy and we can't focus too well anymore. So there's those time restraints too. So when I sit down as mayor, and I'm the ringmaster, and I look at this agenda, and you've been nice enough when you've been doing it, Layla, is kind of put a time frame approximate on each item. I tried to juggle that meeting through that 2.5 hour time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that the public realizes that or not, but anyway.
Yeah, we kind of map out and guesstimate how much each agenda item will happen, and so that we can put together agendas that we can get through and business we can conduct in the time that we have. So yeah, it is a bit of a dance.
Everybody should know that Layla and I get together the week before the few days before she publishes the agenda and reviews how much we can absorb in a meeting to stay within that 2.5 hour time frame. Because years ago, and Linda remembers this, we had a few meetings went 10, 11 o'clock at night, and they just got out of control. And none of us are very effective when they get that long. And if you're trying to do too much in one night, it's just not good. So anyway, there's a lot of planning that goes into the whole process.
Should we see if anyone from
Sure.
the public has any questions?
Any public comments? Certainly.
Raise your hand if you do.
I don't see any hands raised yet.
So you got some outreach ideas you want to tell us about, Layla?
Yeah, I do. So I'll move on to that. And if folks want to jump in later, they certainly can. So I'm trying to see if it's even worth showing a PowerPoint. Probably not. But so I have kind of 4 key things that are coming up that are going to include a number of different outreach activities. So starting with, we have 4 committees. So I wanted to talk about the committees because that's going to be one avenue in which we do outreach. So we have the short-term rental committee, which we'll be talking about later. And those folks will be charged with carrying out certain specific policy questions directed by council. And I suspect there'll be probably some broader community outreach that comes out of that. Jerry and I will be working towards establishing a revenue diversification committee. So we'll get some folks from the community involved in that and starting to work towards our budget diversification. So trying to find other sources of revenue beyond just the TLT that we currently have. There's going to be some significant outreach related to the City Hall project. And I thought I would quickly share a diagram of what that outreach looks like. And just, I will caveat by saying that our architect is going to be at the next meeting and we will be going through that in detail. So I just wanted to let folks know, just sort of a preview of how much outreach we expect to do around that project in particular. So I presume you can see my slides again. Oops. So this is the City Hall project. We're still kind of working on this part. We're about an inch away from being under contract. There'll be some background information these folks are gathering, including looking at the existing buildings, geotech, site survey, et cetera. We'll have our first public meeting. So by the time we come back in July, I'll have some dates for these meetings. So I'll be working with the architect and our owner's rep to establish those meeting dates. But the first meeting will really be about meeting the team. It'll be a big listening session and developing goals for the site. So we're looking at doing the entire site of a master plan. So getting feedback from the community on what do you want to see there? What do you envision for Underhill as a starting point for us before we place our building? Because our little office building is going to go or be somewhere within what's already there. So we have to kind of sort through those things. And then we intend to have 3 public workshops through the design process. And this is just getting us to 30% schematic design. So this is enough to get us to a point where we have a good sense of what the building looks like and how much it costs. It's not a very detailed, it's a very detailed look at what the building can be, but it only gets us through to that 30% window. And so what we're doing is we're going to be spending a lot of time working with our architect and the community and evaluating costs to get a building that works for us before we start diving super deep into the design process. So just wanted folks to know there'll be at least 4 opportunities, plus council meetings and other ways to participate in the City Hall process. The other thing we're going to be kicking off in October is this destination management planning. And Nan Devlin with TCBA is going to be leading that work. And that will be a way for us to use our short-term rental resources that we have that are restricted in a way to help mitigate and balance the impacts of tourism on our community. And so there'll be a couple of outreach activities organized around that. So those are sort of specific things that we're doing. But I also really feel like based on the last year that I've been here, the many conversations I've had with community members out there, that there is a greater need for just general connection, general education and outreach with the community at large. And so one of the things that when I put together my budget proposal for you and for the budget committee to consider was a sort of value-driven approach to engagement, which is, I know all of you know, I'm trained as a planner. I've done a lot of comprehensive planning in my day. And I thought, kind of given with all the work that we have, I could engage with the community over the next 6 months to a year to start establishing kind of what the major issues are that we're dealing with to set us up for a comprehensive plan update. And I had hoped to have, and still would like to have, a series of town halls. So these would be events that we would organize in person, and they would have a topic associated with them and would be a way for the community to come. And it would be myself, probably a subject matter expert perhaps, and maybe a counselor, but to come and talk and to share. And we would take down your ideas and start to use that information to form the basis of a comp plan update. And I had a series of 6 in mind that I was interested in pursuing. But that was sort of at the beginning of the budget process. And I still think that that's important work to do. But since the budget process began, I also played a role as planning director for our city. And we've had a couple of planning commission meetings. And as things happen in the world, they change really quickly. And I really feel like everything I've learned over the last year, what I've learned through the budget process, is I think we need to do more. And so my original budget proposal actually included a pretty significant chunk of money to start a comp plan process. And I held back for a couple of reasons. I felt that I didn't have the capacity to do it, that perhaps we weren't ready to do a comp plan update, and that maybe there was just some more background work that we needed to do in order to get there. And I was also trying to be as fiscally responsible as I could with the resources we have. But as I sit here today, I feel very differently. And I feel like we have a real opportunity before us. And while I feel that I can still do the work that I set out to do in terms of gaining the information that is necessary from folks and learning about what the issues are, I think it's really important that we put our money where our mouth is and we actually lay down some resources to start the comp plan process this year. And that means something probably in the range of 6 figures. To do a comprehensive plan update is not a small task. It is not one that will take a short amount of time, and it takes significant technical expertise to accomplish. And I was really aiming for us to apply for a grant that the Department of Land Conservation Development puts out every other year, which would be in 2023. To get a grant to do our comp plan update. And so I would like to revise that proposal and suggest that we add $130,000 to professional services to be put towards an update of the comprehensive plan that would set us up for that DLCD grant to do a zoning code implementation or some combination of the both, because we have a huge lift ahead of us. A comp plan update is one thing. Updating the enabling ordinances that go with it, such as the zoning code, is quite another. So there has been a lot of discussion about this in the community. As many of you know, for my mental health, I stay off social media, but I know there's a lot of social media chatter about this out there. But I've had enough heart-to-heart conversations with members of the community, and I think with this council as well, to say that I feel that we would be well positioned to do that. I realize that it's a significant ask. And I would really like to hear what the council's thoughts are on that. But I think if we can do this series of town halls and start to talk to folks and at the same time develop a scope of work to start the comp plan process and public outreach process, which is the number one thing that we do in a comp plan update, would be really, I think, what we need to do now. So just throwing that out there, and would love to hear what folks think about that.
Any comments from anybody? Well, I think we all realize that we're going through a transition from being a small little beach community to something larger, and it's a challenge for us, everybody in the community. and to manage ourselves through that. And we're going to
Mayor, if
go ahead. Yeah.
if I might, I am really completely 100% or more supportive of going down this path and doing it more sooner than later. And I think it's a very wise move on the part of the city manager, Layla, to put money aside this coming fiscal year to do that. I had one question for Layla relative to our fiscal stand. We all know that we have significant carryover money, so we're probably well positioned to do it this year or coming year again. But we're getting closer to year end, and I'm just wondering, do you have any updates on where we might be relative to the carryover monies that might be available to us? Because a lot of it is associated with TLT monies, and so you probably have a better handle on what that exact amount's going to be.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any of the numbers from the last quarter yet for our TLT, but what I estimated we would get in TLT, we actually already have. So I'm expecting that we will probably get $100,000 to $200,000 more than what I've already estimated to come in with the TLT. So based on current receipts, I estimated 1.3 million, and we are at 1.3 million, and we still have another quarter that needs to come in. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is that even within the budget that we will be reviewing on the 15th, and the budget committee's already done, we actually may have additional carryover monies that we didn't include in that budget proposal. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Well, again, I'm really supportive of, and I think this is a great approach that Layla has laid out.
Thank you.
A question.
Yes.
The term is it's escaping me right now. Of you've pointed out to us that we really have an ordinance that is not cross-referenced. That it's, you know, we don't. I don't know if it was called a zoning manual or anyway. There's a term for what we don't have, which is the ability to go into our zoning and find out where all the pertinent pieces are that fit together. There's something at the far end of our zoning ordinance that might have an impact on another end that somebody's on. If the city was able to get a grant to do this comprehensively, I'm assuming this is something that at the end of the road, we would have this more comprehensive, holistic ability for the public to jump into the ordinance and really know everything that was important for what they were trying to learn.
I think I'm understanding. Yeah. So I think the difference is between we have an ordinance versus a code, and a code is that what you're getting at? A code is structured in
Right.
like it has a table of contents, and it's
would we end
easy to
up with a
follow.
zoning code at the end of that?
We would be able to design the ordinance differently. The only way that we could have a code is if well, actually, it's a good question, because we could adopt a zoning code, I believe, without having a municipal code. Because the way that we operate is either it's a book of ordinances or you have a municipal code. So let me get back to you on that. That's a great question. I believe we can develop a zoning code that you adopt by ordinance, but it could function like you're talking about. Ideally, and one of the goals that I have, it's a little longer term, is that we have a municipal code. So all of our ordinances are in code language. But let me get back to you on that, Hans. That's a good question. It would be great.
Well, I would just like to join Steve in strongly endorsing this move. Layla, I think my first conversation with you about a year ago. So by the way, congratulations on surviving a year with us.
Thank you.
But I know that in that very first conversation, you diagnosed the problem. And we started talking, not just you and I, but all of us started talking about when down the road we'd be able to deal with the problem. And I would agree with you that it's not just social media chatter, it's real live in-person chatter around town that convinces me that, you know, the time is long since overdue. So to me, this is like, deferred maintenance on a house. It's at a certain point, you gotta pony up. And I think you're wise to get out in front of this. And the fact that we can, if I understand you correctly, we can still be in a position to use that DLCD money for more implementation versus planning, specifically to update the zoning code. It sounds to me like we'd be well advised to get lined up for that, starting as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's great. And we would, and I think that we would be a lot more competitive too. And if we end up doing any kind of housing strategy work, that's one of the top things that they're interested in looking at. And housing is obviously one of the elements of the comprehensive plan. And so if that rises to the top with our community, we may be able to access resources to help us develop a strategy we can actually implement to hopefully make a difference. So thank you for those comments.
Mayor, if I may, one other final, maybe it's not final, one other thought, and Leila, you and I have talked about this, but one thing I would encourage us to do, we're putting money into a professional services account, which seems to be growing right before our eyes, which is not a bad thing, right? But the output of that over the next fiscal year in terms of monitoring the spending and where our spending is going, you and I had a brief conversation about how we might do some kind of project identifiers so that whatever you're able to provide us in terms of reporting, we can identify how and how much and how those monies are being allocated. So I just throw that in there as something that maybe we talk on the 15th, I don't know, but sometime early in the fiscal year, we should probably talk about that.
Yeah, thank you. And what I think that's a great suggestion and one that I would want to track internally. So what we discussed at the budget hearings was we would be doing quarterly updates. And so what we're going to do on our side is for the professional services, we'll internally assign project codes so we can see what we're spending on, say, professional services related to the comprehensive plan versus our IT contracts, versus our attorney, so that the council and the budget committee members, as Councilor Nuttall pointed out, can kind of see that we now have this rather large number in professional services. Well, it's not just going to our attorney. We can clearly indicate what's been spent where, and then hopefully that provides additional transparency and information for folks, particularly you guys, decision makers.
So is there any public comment on conversations we're having here?
Yeah, for sure. I thought, you know what, can I try something fun?
What's that? I don't know. You're scaring me.
I know. Here, let me just try. Let's see. Okay. You can create polls in Zoom. So, oh geez. I'm gonna add a question. Hang on. This is the first time I've done it, so I'll probably just ruin it. Okay. Do you think? Okay. You still there?
Yeah, we're here. We're watching you.
Okay, sorry, I was typing. Maybe this isn't the greatest thing to ask, but I'm going to ask the community members a question through a poll and to see if you. So I asked, do you think starting the comp plan this year is a good idea? Should I ask that? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you
Sure.
see it? Can you see it? Is it up
Yeah.
there? Okay, so answer.
So we get to answer as panelists also?
Yeah, and so do the attendees. They should all be able to.
We can't vote.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you don't get to vote.
Right.
Oh, it does say host and panelists cannot vote down at the bottom.
Yeah. I'm so far at 56% participation.
It's not bad.
No. Okay.
What's the verdict?
Well, we got 10%, 10 people. All right, I'm gonna end the poll. 11. All right, I'm gonna wait a second. People are answering. So great. The technology can be fun. All right, I'm gonna publish the poll. We had, it's like 100% answered.
Oh, good.
Yeah. You see?
Pretty solid.
All right, that's good. Okay.
All right.
Layla, can you get the names of all those participants so we can use in about 6 months when things,
Yeah, we'll take a screenshot.
They changed
Okay.
their minds.
I think that's another example of why this comp plan and the timing of the comp plan is so good. We need to engage the community more, and this is a perfect way. It's important to the community. The timing is right. And that's a small example of what we can do, but that's a very powerful example, and we need to do more of that. So I think this is both good timing and fiscally responsible and certainly appropriate.
Do you have any questions you want to ask the public right now?
Sometimes, Layla, it's a good idea to prepare those ahead of time.
I know. I was just thinking it'd be a fun way to entertain.
I think it's a
Here.
great idea.
Well, I was curious actually if I did a town hall I called it my everything and the kitchen sink town hall. So where I would just show up, put it out to the community and be at the Pine Grove, have a bunch of whiteboards, some help to take notes. Would people show up to that and just sort of come and share just generally what's on their mind? Because that'll help us as a city understand, and really I'll be able to bring that back to city council and share with you and the rest of the community what I heard. So I'm going to ask our little group here what they think. Because I have this fear that I'll invite people to a party. It's why I don't have birthday parties and no one will come. So
I will place money on that. You'll need to have the fire marshal there to keep the crowd under control. Because I don't know that this community has ever had one of those kind of meetings where we didn't have.
Right.
So.
should my next poll be, am I crazy to even try to do something like that?
No, that's a great idea.
I just figure, why not? Let's talk. Let's do it. Okay, so far it's 100%. 100%. Yay. Okay, party on. Well, I'm going to put together a list of those, and I'm actually going to get hopefully some help. I've talked with some folks throughout the community, hoping to hire somebody who has a little bit of experience with kind of planning events, maybe community coordination and outreach. So if you do have some experience in that and want to talk to me, please do. But this person would just kind of help me coordinate the logistics around these events. And then the other thing I was talking with some members of the community about is doing something that's a little bit softer, where maybe the city sponsors, say, a fun event like a movie in the park or some sort of gathering, where perhaps there's information, say, about a project, or it's paired with a town hall, but more of just a social gathering that, maybe some staff or members of the council show up. There's no business conducted, but does the council have any? It just seems a little more folksy, small town, which I kind of like. And it was brought up to me by a couple of members of the community. And so I thought that could be kind of fun to throw, have a couple of events throughout the good weather that are just more social in nature, but the city would help sponsor by supporting volunteers and maybe materials and things like that. So
Let me tell you about an event I went to down in Florence a few years ago. They had the Mayor's Association conference down there, and they did a ice cream social on their main street in Old Town Florence. And they had the volunteer fire department, had a fire truck there, and they were trying to recruit volunteers and a couple other little booths and stuff. And the mayor and the city manager were serving free ice cream cones to anybody. And they kind of, you would have to close Lanita for a few hours, and it was really a lot of fun and a lot of kids and stuff. There's another idea I just thought of that you could think about. So anyway.
Well, I love it. I guess that's part of what, I'm curious to hear is those kinds of ideas. And for folks from the community too, feel free to shoot ideas to us. But does that seem like something that I put some resources in the budget for outreach, and this felt like just folks in the community are really hungry, I think, to connect and be together. And I know there's a lot of disappointment around the 4th of July parade. I'm really sorry. But this might be a nice way for us to connect as we start to deal with some of these pretty big issues as a community. Okay.
Well, our farmers market has certainly grown over the years. I mean, it looks like this year it is really successful and a lot of vendors, and it's we can all remember when it used to be in the parking lot of a real estate company, and then it outgrew that, and we moved it into the parking lot across the fire station, and they basically outgrew that, and now they're fill the whole field up there at Underhill.
Yeah.
So anyway,
It's great.
Well, the last idea I had, well, not the last one, but there's the one I wanted to mention is it's slightly self-serving, but not really, which is I'd like for the city, and that means staff, to have more of a presence in terms of sort of the community outreach that we do. And I was really inspired by what the Neoconi school district does with respect to kids who are trying to get on the honor roll. And so they require 7 hours of community service. And I wanted to offer an opportunity for maybe coordinating with the school district, and not only just the school district, but perhaps, again, this was another idea a community member brought to me, coordinating kind of local, where the staff would be somehow involved, local cleanups or local ways that we can engage with members of the community to help provide volunteer service in our community. And so I'm planning as a parent to volunteer for the school, but as to help with making those connections, because in my job, I'm able to meet lots of people, the Nehalem Bay Land Trust. There's a number of other organizations that have outreach opportunities. My daughter participated in one with EVCNB where she got to play the lost child, and she thought that was the most awesome thing in the world. So I'd like to have at least 2 to 3 events for the next year where city staff are involved. And I can tell you that Public Works and PD, they're all about trying to engage with the community as well. So I have officers and Public Works folks that are reaching out and finding ways that we can engage more with people in the community. So just really trying to promote this idea of service. So I wanted to throw that idea out there and see if y'all would be comfortable with us kind of maybe at least hosting 1 or 2 volunteer events throughout the next year. And more if I can handle it, but I'm just trying to set some realistic expectations. But that's where if I can get someone to help me a little bit with the organization, I just show up, and that's cool. Okay.
I think I can safely say that any of the council folks would be happy to help you in whatever you think is appropriate. So
Yes.
you're not out there by yourself. I was also going to mention that former council president Leila Salmon has had her hand up patiently for some time.
Oh,
so
shut down my window. Thanks. Thank you. Sorry, I missed that.
where are you, Leila? As opposed to Layla?
Leila, you should be able to unmute.
Couldn't get the mouse to work. It's actually Joe.
Oh,
I had
But Leela's here.
yeah. I had a question going back to the town hall meetings, which, yes, I voted yes. I think that's a wonderful idea. Just curious to know whether the new Oregon public meeting law would require that those in public town meetings have a Zoom component.
So they don't, because they're not actually what you would call a public meeting. So it's it's a public meeting in the sense that we're all together, but there's not a governing body making decisions. So it's separate from that House bill that just passed last year.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Having said that, I don't know if Zoom is the right way to do it, but certainly some kind of a way of memorializing the meeting so other people can see it after the fact, if that's how you end up doing it.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind.
I actually think a Zoom is not a bad thing, that you just have to have control over it in terms of how you, how the meeting's conducted. And maybe that's a
I will add
moderator.
that the Pine Grove is working on a thing. OWL is the technology that it makes an easy interface between meetings and Zoom, that if they can figure it out and get it working, it would be available for anybody who's using the Pine Grove.
Cool. Yeah, I like that idea. I think, again, just talking with folks in the community, I'm sure all of you have heard this too, there's just a real desire to meet in person, but I agree we might want to do maybe a combination of both, and because we can cast a wider net when you do have Zoom meetings, but just trying to get that appetite for in-person connection satiated, because I get it. I wish I could see my staff more. Nina's locked up in another room and everyone else is in different buildings. It's lonely. Okay. Well,
any other questions or comments, or what else you got? Or is that
I have one quick question for Layla, excuse me. So going back to the meetings that the architect is going to have, the public meetings, I think I should probably know the answer to this, and I don't, so I apologize. But the 3 scheduled meetings, after the kickoff meeting, the 3 scheduled public meetings, are they intended to be for 3 separate audiences, or can people go to all 3, or they?
People should come to all 3.
Okay.
Absolutely. And they'll be sort of, they'll build off of each other.
Okay, gotcha.
So, and we'll have, again, much more details next month, but I just wanted people to know that we're not going to design this thing in a vacuum. And just to prepare, we're going to be asking you for your feedback.
Good.
Yeah.
okay? No other questions from anybody, and no other items to discuss. I guess we could adjourn then, couldn't we?
Yeah, well, I know this is a little squishy, but I do want to say thank you. It was really helpful for me to have a chance to just sort of think through all the stuff we're doing and kind of get your nod and blessing on a few things. And I'm very excited about the comp plan. So I'll prepare that and look forward to our deliberations and discussions at the budget committee meeting next Wednesday. And I'll be back at 6 for our meeting later tonight too.
Oh, you promise?
Yeah.
Well, we better all promise to be back.
Yeah.
I just want to say one more thing before we adjourn in the vein of community communication, and I'm going to repeat this again tonight, but I'm sure everybody's aware by now that I will not be running again for mayor this fall. And after 17 years in serving at the community, and I want to ask everyone to go check out the Manzanita's candidate guide, which is on the front page of the city's website. I mean, you can apply for mayor, or we got a couple of city council positions that are opening. You got all the way to August 30th to apply and get into the action. And it's healthy for our community to have multiple candidates and competitive races. And I want to encourage everybody to look at that. And please consider serving your community that we all love. So there you go. And nobody's got anything else. Let's go have dinner. We'll see you at 6.
Thank you.